Lady Rosalind Ashford stood alone before the towering windows of Ravenshade Manor, her reflection a spectre against the storm-darkened glass. The wedding band upon her finger, a heavy platinum circlet engraved with ravens in flight, caught the firelight and gleamed like a shackle. Scarcely 4 hours had passed since she had bound herself to the most feared man in all of England, and already the weight of her decision pressed upon her chest like a stone. The lamb led to slaughter, they had whispered, those vultures of high society who gorged themselves on the misfortunes of those beneath them. Their words had cut like glass as she had walked the aisle toward her fate, each step an eternity. Poor wretched girl, one duchess had murmured behind her silk fan, her voice dripping with false sympathy. To be chained to the Duke of Ravenshade, they call him the devil's own son. His Grace, the Iron Duke, another had hissed, her eyes alight with malicious glee. They say his first wife threw herself from the eastern tower, found broken upon the stones like a discarded doll, her white gown stained crimson. The assembly had fallen into suffocating silence as Lord Adrian Blackwood had entered the chapel. Tall and imposing in his black tailcoat, his face carved from marble and shadow, he had seemed less man than monument. The scar that traced from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, a cruel slash of silver against his sun-bronzed skin, had caught the candlelight as he turned to face her. His eyes, the color of a winter storm, had swept over her once, revealing nothing. Rosalind closed her eyes against the memory, her fingers instinctively rising to the delicate sapphire pendant at her throat, her mother's last gift before the fever had claimed her. The necklace carried the weight of everything, her family's expectations, her father's desperation, her younger sister's future. Her father's debts had piled like autumn leaves before a coming frost. The investments were lost to a swindler's scheme, the ancestral home mortgaged thrice over, the shame of debtor's prison looming like a guillotine blade. When the Duke of Ravenshade had sent his proposal through his cold-eyed solicitor, Mr. Tobias Grimm, her father had wept with relief and shame in equal measure. "You need not sacrifice yourself, Rosalind," he had whispered, though his trembling hands had clutched the parchment as though it were salvation itself. "I cannot ask this of you." "You ask nothing, father," she had replied, her voice steady despite the tempest within. "I offer it freely." A crack of thunder shook the manor's ancient stones, startling Rosalind from her reverie. The great doors of the bedchamber swung open. Lord Adrian Blackwood stood upon the threshold, framed by the corridor's amber gaslight. He had removed his coat but remained formally attired in waistcoat and cravat, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. Every inch of him spoke of controlled power, of barely leashed danger. The Duchess's chambers had been prepared with meticulous care, fresh linens upon the four-poster bed, lavender and rose oil upon the vanity, a fire crackling against the autumn chill. A mockery of romance for a marriage built upon coin and desperation. "Your Grace," Rosalind acknowledged, her voice betraying her with the slightest tremor. The Duke of Ravenshade studied her with those unfathomable storm-gray eyes, his expression unreadable. "Lady Rosalind," he responded, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "I trust your chambers meet with your approval." "They are. Most generous, my lord." Silence stretched between them like a drawn blade. Rosalind steeled herself for what must come next, the duty of a wife, the final payment for her family's salvation. She had prepared herself for coldness, perhaps even cruelty. The whispers had painted him as a monster who had driven his first wife to madness and death. He approached with measured steps, each footfall a drumbeat against her racing pulse. When he stood before her, close enough that she could smell sandalwood and leather, close enough to see the faint lines around his eyes, Rosalind forced herself to meet his gaze, though every instinct screamed at her to flee. "You tremble," he observed quietly. "Forgive me, your Grace. I shall compose myself." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You fear me." It was not a question. The tongue's whispers had painted him a devil, a man without mercy, a husband who had broken his first wife's spirit before her body met the stones. "I know my duty, sir," she replied, the words bitter as ash upon her tongue. For a long moment, the Duke of Ravenshade regarded her in silence. Then, with a gentleness that shocked her to her core, he reached out and took her hand in his. His touch was warm, His fingers, calloused yet careful, closed around hers with a tenderness that defied every whisper, every warning, every fear that had haunted her steps to the altar. He did not pull her toward the bed, did not make demands. He simply held her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture so achingly gentle that Rosalind felt her breath catch. "Not tonight," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to reverberate through her very bones. "Tonight, you shall rest, unmolested, unafraid." Rosalind stared at him, bewildered by this impossible reprieve. The touch of his hand upon hers, so unlike the brutal claim she had steeled herself to endure, left her without words. Every carefully rehearsed response died upon her lips. "But the marriage must be—" "We have many nights ahead of us, Lady Ravenshade," he interrupted, the slightest emphasis on her new title. "There is no urgency, no debt to be paid in suffering." His eyes, those winter storm eyes, held something she could not name. Regret, perhaps, or sorrow, or something deeper still, something that made her heart stutter in her chest. "Sleep well," he murmured, releasing her hand with obvious reluctance. And then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving Rosalind alone in the firelit chamber. Her hand still tingled where he had touched her. Her heart beat a rhythm she did not recognize. Not fear, not quite relief, but something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously like hope. Ravenshade Manor rose from the Yorkshire moors like a crown of blackened stone, its towers clawing at the gray English sky. For 2 weeks, Rosalind had dwelled within its ancient walls, learning the corridors of her gilded cage. The servants whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. Mrs. Holloway, the stern-faced housekeeper, had served the Blackwood family for 30 years. She watched Rosalind with eyes that held both pity and warning. "The previous Duchess was kind too," the woman had murmured once, arranging flowers in Rosalind's chamber. "Sweet Lady Catherine, such a gentle soul." Her voice had dropped to barely a whisper. Too gentle for this place. For him. Rosalind had wanted to ask more, but Mrs. Holloway's lips had pressed into a thin line, and the subject was closed. Each day followed the same pattern. She and the Duke dined together in the cavernous hall, exchanged polite conversation about weather and estate matters, then retired to separate chambers. Each evening, he escorted her to her door with formal correctness and departed with a bow. No affection, no demands, no explanation. Yet that first touch lingered in her memory like a brand. The unexpected gentleness that had left her more confused than any cruelty could have. "Your Grace," came a familiar voice that made Rosalind's heart leap with joy. She turned from the morning room window to find Clara Whitmore, her dearest friend since childhood, standing in the doorway with arms outstretched. "Clara!" Rosalind rushed to embrace her. "How did you—" "I simply appeared at the gate and demanded entry," Clara said with characteristic boldness, squeezing her tight. "I told them I wouldn't leave until I saw you with my own eyes, to ensure you were still whole." The unspoken fear hung between them. "I am well," Rosalind assured her, though the words felt incomplete. "Truly." Clara's sharp green eyes studied her face. "You look well enough, if pale. And the Duke? Is he as monstrous as they say?" Before Rosalind could answer, a deep voice cut through the room. "You may judge for yourself, Miss Whitmore." Both women turned to find Lord Adrian Blackwood standing at the threshold, still in his riding clothes, his dark hair windswept, his storm-gray eyes fixed upon Clara with an intensity that made most people shrink. Clara, to her credit, merely curtsied with perfect composure. "Your Grace, forgive my intrusion." "You are Lady Ravenshade's guest," he replied, his tone measured. "You require no forgiveness. You are welcome to stay as long as you wish." He turned his gaze to Rosalind, and something flickered in those cold eyes, something almost warm. "My wife should have companionship. This house has been silent too long." With that, he bowed and departed, leaving both women staring after him. "Well," Clara breathed when the door closed, "he's terrifying, certainly, but not quite the demon the gossips paint." "No," Rosalind murmured, touching the sapphire at her throat. "Not quite." Clara leaned closer, voice dropping. Rose, the town is ablaze with talk. Lady Vivian Ashcroft has been holding court at every salon, speaking of the Duke with such intimacy. She claims she was his mistress until weeks before your marriage. Ice flooded Rosalind's veins. Lady Vivian, beautiful, cruel, and hungry for power. She speaks of his first wife's death as well, Clara continued carefully, in terms that stop just short of accusation. She implies he drove Lady Catherine to despair. Then to that tower window. Rosalind's fingers tightened around her pendant. Do you believe it? Clara studied her friend's face. I believe that Lady Vivian covets what you now possess. Title, wealth, him. Jealousy makes vipers of even lesser women, and she was never lesser in her venom. What do I truly know of the man I married? Rosalind whispered. He shows me kindness, yet everyone speaks of darkness. He touches me with gentleness, yet his first wife died in terror. Then perhaps, Clara said softly, you must discover the truth for yourself, not from whispers, but from him. Through the window, Rosalind watched her husband astride his black stallion, riding toward the moors with punishing speed, as though fleeing demons only he could see. What secrets haunted the Duke of Ravenshade? And did she have the courage to uncover them? The library of Ravenshade Manor held generations of Blackwood secrets bound in leather and locked behind glass. It was here that Rosalind sought refuge on the third morning of Clara's visit, her mind troubled by whispers and mysteries. She traced her fingers along ancient spines, philosophy, poetry, histories of England's bloodiest wars. This room had become her sanctuary, a place where she might find answers in the silence. The creak of the door made her turn. The Duke stood in the doorway, a leather folio tucked beneath his arm. For a moment neither spoke. Forgive me, he said finally. I did not mean to disturb you. You do not disturb me, my lord. This is your library. It is yours as well now. He moved to his desk, setting down the folio with careful precision. You are welcome to any volume, even those locked away. Rosalind's curiosity sparked. Why would books need to be locked? Something flickered across his face. Pain, perhaps, or regret. Some truths are difficult to bear. Before she could respond, he withdrew a small key from his waistcoat and unlocked a cabinet behind his desk. From within, he removed a slender journal bound in faded blue leather. This belonged to Catherine, he said quietly, extending it toward her. My first wife. Rosalind's breath caught. She stared at the journal as though it were a serpent. Why would you give me this? His storm-gray eyes met hers with devastating directness. Because you deserve truth, not whispers. Because I would have you know what happened in this house, what I failed to prevent. Her hands trembled as she accepted the journal. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and that same inexplicable warmth flooded through her. Read it, he said, his voice rough with emotion she'd never heard from him. And then decide what manner of man you have married. He turned to leave, but Rosalind found her voice. Your Grace, Adrian, wait. He froze at the sound of his given name upon her lips. Whatever is written here, she said carefully, will you answer my questions about it, truthfully? For a long moment, he stood with his back to her, shoulders rigid. I will tell you everything, though you may wish you had remained in ignorance. Then he was gone, leaving Rosalind alone with the dead woman's words. She did not open the journal immediately. Instead, she carried it to her chambers, her heart pounding with equal parts dread and determination. Clara found her there an hour later, the unopened journal on her lap. What is that? Her friend asked. The truth, Rosalind whispered. I think. With trembling fingers, she opened to the first page. The handwriting was delicate, feminine, each letter carefully formed. January 3rd, 1847. I have married the Duke of Ravenshade. Mother says I should be overjoyed, but I feel only dread. There is something in his eyes, a coldness that frightens me. Or perhaps it is not coldness at all, but pain so deep it has frozen into ice. Rosalind's throat tightened. She turned the page. January 15th. He barely speaks to me. We dine in silence. He has not yet claimed his marital rights, and I confess I am grateful. The servants whisper that he still mourns his lost love, Lady Vivian Ashcroft, who refused his proposal years ago to marry an earl instead. They say he married me only to spite her after she was widowed. Rosalind's blood turned cold. Vivian. February 2nd. I received another letter today. Anonymous, as always. It describes in detail my husband's movements, his visits to London, his meetings with her. The letters say he regrets our marriage, that he wishes me gone so he might pursue the woman he truly loves. I am beginning to believe them. The entries continued, each more desperate than the last. Clara read over Rosalind's shoulder, her face growing pale. March 10th. I confronted Adrian about the letters. He denied everything, claimed they were lies meant to poison me against him. But how can I believe him when he treats me with such cold indifference, when he cannot even bear to touch me? I am so very alone in this dark house. The final entry was dated March 18th, the day before Catherine's death. I cannot bear it any longer. The letters, the whispers, the certainty that I am unloved and unwanted. Tonight, I shall seek the truth. I shall go to the Eastern Tower where the servants say he keeps his secrets. I must know if my husband is the man he claims to be, or the monster I fear. The page ended there. Rosalind's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the journal. She went to the tower seeking answers, Clara breathed, and she fell. Or was pushed, Rosalind whispered. A sharp knock at the door made both women jump. Mrs. Holloway stood in the doorway, her face ashen. Your Grace, forgive the intrusion, but this just arrived by courier. The messenger said it was urgent. She extended a sealed letter. Rosalind broke the wax with numb fingers and unfolded the parchment. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, vicious. Dear Duchess, how tragic that you should suffer the same fate as your predecessor. Adrian Blackwood destroys everything he touches. Catherine learned this truth too late. I pray you prove wiser. I have evidence of what truly happened the night she died. Meet me in the Eastern Tower at midnight tomorrow if you wish to know the truth about the man you married. A friend. The letter bore no signature, but Rosalind knew with cold certainty who had sent it. Lady Vivian Ashcroft. Rosalind did not tell Adrian about the letter. Instead, she spent the day studying Catherine's journal, searching for clues hidden between the desperate lines. That evening at dinner, she watched her husband across the table. His face remained an unreadable mask as he cut his meat with precise movements. You've read it, he said without looking up. She stiffened. How did you? You look at me differently now. His storm gray eyes finally met hers. With suspicion, fear, as she did toward the end. Can you blame me? Rosalind's voice trembled. She received anonymous letters claiming you loved another, that you wished her gone. Adrian's jaw clenched. I never sent those letters. But did you love Lady Vivian? The silence stretched unbearably. Once, he finally admitted. Years ago. Before she married Lord Ashcroft for his fortune and title. Before she revealed her true nature. And when she was widowed, Rosalind pressed. When did you marry Catherine? Adrian set down his knife with careful control. Lady Vivian came to me after her husband's death, expecting I would still want her. I refused. I had married Catherine in good faith. I intended to honor those vows. Yet you kept your distance from your wife, never touched her. His eyes flashed with something raw. Because she flinched every time I came near, because the poison of those letters had already done their work. I gave her space, thinking tenderness and time would heal the damage. Instead, she believed my restraint was rejection. The anguish in his voice struck Rosalind like a physical blow. I found her at the base of the tower at dawn, he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. She had gone there in the night, searching through my private papers for evidence of my supposed betrayal. The railing was old, rotted. When it gave way, he closed his eyes. I failed to protect her from the lies, from her own despair. Rosalind's heart twisted painfully. And Lady Vivian, she sent those letters to Catherine, didn't she? I could never prove it. But yes, I believe so. As I believe she now seeks to poison you against me the same way. He reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. Rosalind, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I swear on my life, I will not let history repeat itself. Whatever Vivian plans, whatever she's told you, do not let her manipulate you as she did Catherine. Rosalind stared at his outstretched hand. Every instinct of self-preservation screamed at her to pull away, to believe the warnings, to protect herself. Instead, she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers with that same devastating gentleness she remembered from their wedding night. Warmth flooded through her, and something else, something that felt dangerously like trust. "The letter," she said quietly. "Vivian wants me to meet her in the Eastern Tower, tomorrow at midnight." Adrian's grip tightened. "Absolutely not. It's a trap." "Of course it's a trap," Rosalind agreed, "which is why we shall spring it together." For the first time since she'd known him, Adrian Blackwood smiled, a real smile that transformed his harsh features into something almost beautiful. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Lady Ravenshade." "Perhaps both," she replied, returning his smile. "But I am also very tired of being afraid." Their hands remained clasped across the table, the first true connection they had shared. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the moors, and somewhere in the darkness, Lady Vivian Ashcroft plotted her revenge. But for the first time since her wedding day, Rosalind felt something other than fear. She felt ready to fight. The Eastern Tower stood like a sentinel against the midnight sky, its stone walls slick with rain. Rosalind climbed the spiral staircase, her heart hammering against her ribs. Adrian moved silently behind her, a protective shadow. They had planned carefully. He would remain hidden while she confronted Vivian, revealing himself only if danger arose. The tower room was circular, empty save for rotted furniture and the broken railing where Catherine had fallen. Moonlight spilled through the gaps, illuminating a single figure standing by the window. Lady Vivian Ashcroft turned, her beauty sharp as a blade in the darkness. "How punctual, Your Grace," she purred. "And how foolish." "You sent the letters to Catherine," Rosalind said steadily. "You drove her to despair." Vivian's laugh was cold. "Catherine was weak. She believed every word I wrote because she knew the truth. Adrian never loved her. He married her to spite me after I chose wealth over his penniless devotion." "He wasn't penniless when you were widowed." "No," Vivian agreed, circling closer. "By then he was the Duke, and he should have been mine. Would have been, if not for his ridiculous sense of honor. He actually intended to remain faithful to that insipid girl. So you destroyed her." "I liberated him." Vivian's eyes glittered with malice. "Catherine's death was her own doing. I merely encouraged her despair, as I shall encourage yours." She withdrew a folded parchment from her cloak. "This document names Adrian as the sole beneficiary of Catherine's substantial dowry, paid in full upon her death. What will society think when they learn he profited from her demise?" Rosalind's blood ran cold. "That's a lie." "Is it? The contract exists, signed by Adrian himself." Vivian smiled cruelly. "Unless you convince him to set you aside and marry me instead, I shall ensure this reaches every scandal sheet in London. The Duke of Ravensshade will be ruined." "You would blackmail me into destroying my own marriage?" "I would reclaim what is rightfully mine." "I am not Catherine," Rosalind said quietly. "I do not break so easily." Vivian's expression darkened. "Then perhaps you require more direct lesson." She moved with shocking speed, lunging toward Rosalind, but Adrian emerged from the shadows, catching Vivian's wrist before she could strike. "Enough," he commanded, his voice deadly calm. Vivian's mask of beauty shattered into rage. "You, always you, standing between me and everything I deserve." "You deserve nothing but justice," Adrian replied, "and you shall have it." "Release me!" Vivian struggled in his grip. "You cannot prove anything." "Can't I?" A new voice cut through the darkness. Mr. Tobias Grimm, Adrian's solicitor, stepped into the tower room, another man beside him, pale, nervous, familiar. "This is Mr. Edward Finch," Grimm announced, "Lady Vivian's former secretary. He has confessed to forging the dowry document at her instruction. He also kept copies of every letter she dictated to the late Duchess Catherine." Vivian went deathly pale. "Edward, you wouldn't dare—" "You promised me marriage," Finch said bitterly. "You promised me everything. Instead, you plan to discard me once you secure the Duke. I'll not hang for your schemes, my lady. The truth crashed over Rosalind like a wave. Adrian had suspected Vivian's blackmail attempt. He had found her co-conspirator and turned him in before tonight's confrontation. He had protected Rosalind before she even knew she needed protecting. Adrian released Vivian, his expression carved from stone. You have two choices. Confess your crimes publicly and accept exile to the continent, or face trial for conspiracy and fraud. Vivian's beautiful face contorted with hatred. You'll regret this, Adrian. Both of you. The only regret I carry, Adrian said softly, is that I didn't see your true nature before Catherine paid the price. As Grimm escorted the cursing Vivian from the tower, Rosalind's legs suddenly gave way. Adrian caught her, pulling her against his chest. You're safe, he murmured into her hair. I swear it. You're safe. And for the first time since arriving at Ravenshade Manor, Rosalind truly believed him. 3 days after Vivian's exposure, the scandal broke across London like a fever. The newspapers were merciless. Though Vivian had fled to France, her final act of revenge was a series of published letters claiming Adrian had orchestrated Catherine's death and now manipulated his innocent second wife. Rosalind stood in the morning room, reading the vicious headlines with numb fingers. Duke of Death ensnares second victim. Poor girl trapped in Ravenshade's web. Family sold daughter to monster for coin. The last headline made her stomach turn. They were attacking her father now, painting him as a man who'd sacrificed his daughter to a killer for money. Your Grace, Mrs. Holloway appeared in the doorway, her face grave. A letter has arrived from your father. Rosalind tore open the seal with shaking hands. My dearest Rosalind, the scandal has reached us. I am being called before creditors who now claim the Duke's payments were made with blood money. They demand I return every penny or face criminal charges for accepting funds from a suspected murderer. Your sister Margaret has been expelled from her school. No respectable family will receive us. I do not blame you, my child. I blame myself for placing you in this position. The solicitors say there is one solution, an annulment. If you dissolve the marriage and return to us, the scandal may yet be contained. I leave the choice to you. The letter slipped from Rosalind's fingers. Everything she had sacrificed, her freedom, her future, her heart, was unraveling, and now her family faced ruin because of her marriage. Rosalind! Adrian's voice came from the doorway. She couldn't look at him. My father wants me to seek an annulment. I know. His voice was carefully controlled. My solicitor informed me this morning. The church court would grant it easily. We've never consummated the union. The clinical words cut like glass. Is that what you want? She whispered. Silence, heavy and suffocating. What I want, Adrian said finally, is irrelevant. You married me to save your family. Now our marriage destroys them. I will not be the architect of your ruin as I was Catherine's. You didn't ruin Catherine. Didn't I? His voice turned harsh. She died because of her association with me. Because Vivian's obsession with me poisoned everything. Now history repeats itself, and you suffer for my cursed name. So you'll simply let me go? Anger flared in her chest. Without a fight? I'm letting you live! He turned on her, and she saw raw anguish in his storm gray eyes. Don't you understand? Everyone I care for is destroyed. My mother died when I was 12. Catherine threw herself from a tower. Every woman who bears the name Ravenshade meets tragedy. That's superstition. Is it? He laughed bitterly. Look at the evidence, Rosalind. Look at what our marriage has cost you in mere weeks. Your reputation, your family's standing, your sister's future. How long before you're found broken at the base of a tower? How long before my weakness kills you too? Your weakness? Rosalind's voice shook. Your only weakness is believing you're cursed instead of cursed by others' cruelty. Believe what you will. Adrian's expression shuttered closed, the warmth she'd glimpsed vanishing behind ice. I've instructed Grimm to begin annulment proceedings. You'll leave for your father's house tomorrow with a settlement generous enough to satisfy the creditors and restore your family's name. And if I refuse, you won't. He moved toward the door, not looking back. Because despite everything, You're a dutiful daughter. You'll do what's right for your family, as you did when you married me. Adrian, goodbye, Rosalind. The door closed with quiet finality. Rosalind sank into a chair, her vision blurring with tears. Around her, servants began packing her belongings. By tomorrow, she will be gone from Ravenshade Manor, and the man she'd only just begun to love would disappear behind his walls of ice forever. Outside, storm clouds gathered like an omen. Rosalind stood in her packed chamber, staring at the trunks that would carry her away from Ravenshade at dawn. Rain lashed against the windows like accusations. Clara sat beside her, holding her hand. You don't have to go. My family will survive, Clara interrupted firmly. They always do. But will you survive losing him? The question pierced Rosalind's heart. When did it happen? When had duty transformed into something deeper? When fear becomes trust and trust becomes love. She loved Adrian Blackwood. The realization struck her like lightning. Not the fearsome Duke of Ravenshade, but the man beneath. The one who had given her gentleness when he could have taken by force. Who had shared his dead wife's journal to give her truth instead of lies. Who had protected her from Vivian before she even knew she needed protecting. Who was now pushing her away because he believed himself cursed. He thinks he's saving me, Rosalind whispered, by letting me go. And what do you think? Rosalind stood abruptly, purpose flooding through her veins. I think I didn't survive my mother's death, my family's ruin, and Vivian's schemes, only to surrender now. She strode to her writing desk and withdrew Catherine's journal, flipping through the pages with new eyes. Something had nagged at her since first reading it, some detail that didn't align. There, March 18th, the final entry. Tonight I shall seek the truth. I shall go to the Eastern Tower, where the servants say he keeps his secrets. The servants say, Rosalind repeated aloud. Clara, who would tell Catherine that Adrian kept secrets in the tower? Clara's eyes widened. Someone who wanted her there. Someone who knew the railing was rotten. Vivian couldn't have acted alone. Rosalind's mind raced. She needed someone inside Ravenshade. Someone who could plant suspicions, deliver anonymous letters, ensure Catherine went to that tower on that specific night. Mrs. Holloway has served here for 30 years, Clara said slowly. She was here when Catherine died, and she's been filling my head with warnings since I arrived. Rosalind's blood ran cold. She wanted me to be afraid of Adrian, isolated, exactly as Catherine was. She grabbed the journal and ran from the room, Clara following close behind. She found Adrian in his study, staring into the fire with a glass of untouched whiskey. You're not cursed, she announced, bursting through the door. You're sabotaged. He looked up, surprised, breaking through his icy mask. Rosalind, what? Mrs. Holloway, how much do you truly know about her? She served my family since before I inherited the title. She was my father's— Adrian stopped, his expression shifting. My father's housekeeper. She came with the estate when he won it from Lord Ashcroft in a card game. Lord Ashcroft, Rosalind repeated. Vivian's late husband. The pieces fell into place between them like a completed puzzle. She's been Vivian's agent all along, Adrian breathed, watching me, reporting to her, helping destroy Catherine. And now trying to destroy us. Rosalind moved to stand before him, taking both his hands in hers. But I won't be destroyed, Adrian, and I won't leave you to face this darkness alone. His storm-gray eyes searched her face. Your family will understand that some battles must be fought, not fled. She squeezed his hands. I am not Catherine. I am not afraid. And I am not leaving. For the first time in days, hope flickered in Adrian's expression. You're certain? I've never been more certain of anything, she smiled. Besides, you promised me many nights ahead, remember? I intend to collect. Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she were salvation itself. Then we fight, he murmured against her hair. Together. Together, she agreed. Outside, the storm began to break. They found Mrs. Holloway in the servants' hall, directing the maids with her usual stern efficiency. She looked up as Adrian and Rosalind entered, her expression carefully neutral. Your Grace, I thought you would be resting before tomorrow's departure. There will be no departure, Rosalind said clearly. I'm staying. Something flickered in the housekeeper's eyes. Anger, quickly concealed. How fortunate for his grace. Is it? Adrian stepped forward, his voice deadly calm. Tell me, Mrs. Holloway, how long have you been in Lady Vivian's employ? The color drained from the woman's face. I don't know what. You were Lord Ashcroft's housekeeper before coming here, Adrian continued. When my father won this estate, you remained the loyal servant. But your true loyalty always belonged to the Ashcroft family, didn't it? Mrs. Holloway's mask cracked. Your father was a gambler and a cheat. He stole this house from its rightful owners. So you helped Vivian steal it back, Rosalind said. Through me. Through Catherine before me. Catherine was weak, Mrs. Holloway spat, her composure shattering. She believed every whisper I planted, every doubt I nurtured. Getting her to that tower was almost too easy. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. You knew the railing was rotted. I ensured it was rotted. The housekeeper's smile was vicious. Just as I ensured she'd go there alone, desperate for proof of your betrayal. Lady Vivian wrote the letters, but I delivered them. I whispered in Catherine's ear until she couldn't tell the truth from poison. You murdered her, Rosalind breathed. I liberated her from a loveless marriage. Mrs. Holloway turned her cold gaze to Rosalind. As I would have liberated you, the scandal was meant to drive you to despair, just as the letters drove Catherine. But you proved more resilient than expected. A mistake you'll pay for, Adrian growled. Behind him, Mr. Grimm emerged from the shadows where he'd been hiding, two constables at his side. Mrs. Eleanor Holloway, Grimm announced, you are under arrest for the murder of Lady Catherine Blackwood and conspiracy to commit fraud. Mrs. Holloway lunged toward Rosalind with shocking speed, a letter opener appearing in her hand. If I cannot have Ravenshade for Lady Vivian, no one shall. Adrian moved like lightning, pulling Rosalind behind him as the constables seized Mrs. Holloway. The letter opener clattered to the floor. Take her away, Adrian commanded. As the constables dragged the screaming housekeeper from the manor, Rosalind collapsed against Adrian, her body shaking. It's over, he murmured, wrapping his arms around her. Truly over. Catherine, Rosalind whispered, she deserves justice, and she shall have it. Adrian tilted her face up to meet his gaze. Mrs. Holloway's confession will clear Catherine's name. The world will know she was murdered, not driven to madness, and they'll know I loved her enough to seek the truth. And me? Rosalind asked softly. Do you love me, Adrian? His storm-gray eyes softened with an emotion that made her heart soar. From the moment you placed your hand in mine with trust instead of fear, from the moment you chose to fight beside me instead of flee. Yes, Rosalind, I love you. Completely. Then claim your wife, your grace, she whispered. Properly this time. Adrian smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face, and lifted her into his arms. With pleasure, my beloved Duchess. As he carried her up the stairs toward his chambers, Rosalind knew that this night would be nothing like their wedding night. This night would be everything. 6 months later, spring had transformed Ravenshade Manor. Rosalind stood in the new conservatory Adrian had built for her, surrounded by blooming roses and jasmine. Sunlight streamed through the glass panels, warm and golden, so different from the storm-darkened windows of her wedding night. Your Grace, Clara's voice called from the doorway. The guests are arriving. Today they will host their first ball since the scandal's resolution. Society had been shocked when Mrs. Holloway's full confession was published, exonerating Adrian completely and revealing the depth of Vivian's malice. The tide had turned swiftly. Those who had whispered murderer now clamored for invitations to Ravenshade, eager to witness the love story that had triumphed over such darkness. Rosalind touched the pendant at her throat. No longer her mother's sapphire, but the Blackwood family ruby that Adrian had placed there on their true wedding night. The night he had finally claimed her as his wife in every sense, with a tenderness and passion that still made her blush to remember. Lost in thought? Adrian's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Remembering, she corrected, leaning into his embrace. How far we've come from that first night when you took my hand and told me to rest. I was a fool to wait, he murmured against her neck, but also perhaps wise. You needed to choose me freely, not from duty. And I did choose you. She turned in his arms, placing her hand over his heart. Every day since, I choose you again. His kiss was gentle, reverent, full of the love they'd fought so hard to claim. A knock interrupted them. Mr. Grimm entered with his usual efficiency. Your Grace, a letter from France. Lady Vivian has been arrested for fraud in Paris. She'll face trial there. Good, Adrian said simply. Justice delayed is not justice denied. After Grimm departed, Rosalind touched her husband's scarred cheek. Do you still think of Catherine? Often, he admitted, but without guilt now. She deserves to be remembered with love, not shame. Because of you, her true story is known. Her name is cleared. Because of us, Rosalind corrected. Through the conservatory windows, she watched carriages arrive bearing lords and ladies, including her father and sister Margaret. Her family's debts were settled, their reputation restored, their daughter a duchess, not in name only, but in truth. Adrian's hand moved to rest on Rosalind's still flat stomach, where new life had just begun to grow. And soon Catherine's legacy continues in a new generation? Rosalind covered his hand with hers, tears of joy filling her eyes. A generation born of love, not duty, of trust, not fear. Born of you, Adrian whispered, my brave, beautiful wife who refused to let darkness win. As they walked together toward the ballroom, Rosalind remembered the terrified girl who had stood before storm-darkened windows 6 months ago. That girl had believed herself sacrificed. She had been wrong. She hadn't been sacrificed. She'd been saved, not by a fearsome duke, but by a wounded man who had needed saving just as much as she did. And together, they had transformed Ravenshade from a prison of shadows into a home filled with light. The orchestra began to play. Adrian extended his hand with that same gesture from their wedding night, but now his eyes held no mystery, only love. May I have this dance, Lady Ravenshade? Rosalind placed her hand in his, heart full to bursting. Now and forever, Your Grace. Now and forever. Rosalind and Adrian transformed their marriage of duty into a love that conquered scandal, lies, and tragedy. They chose each other when the world said they shouldn't. Have you ever had to fight for something everyone told you to abandon? What does true love mean to you? Share your thoughts below. I love reading your stories. The end. If this story touched your heart, don't leave just yet. Here on Olivia's Tales, every story holds a lesson, a tear, or a little bit of hope. Subscribe now and join our growing family of dreamers and believers, because the next story might just be the one that changes how you see life. Turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next chapter. And until then, remember, every heart has a story, and here, we tell them all.